So $18 billion, the comment about that from the government this morning is that it is transformational. Is that true? What's your read on it?
Well, look, my read on it is that the first leak that came out said 10 billion. Now, this is the second leak. It's in the paper today, and it just says billions. So no one's committed what the actual figure is, but we're told it's 18 billion. Now, when it first came out, it was 10. People said it wasn't enough. And in fact, some papers today, like the Adelaide Advertiser and others, are saying that the 10 billion wasn't enough. Now we've got this exclusive interview saying it's 18 billion. I think we just have to wait and see what it really is and what the real figures are, because these figures are forward estimates as well. So are we talking about an increase of 4.5 billion over a year, and then that's multiplied by 4 years to make 18 billions? And it's, I think there's a figure of 17.7. So look, the old saying, the devil is in the detail. But what is really good news is that the government is putting more money into aged care. But let's do some evidence-based research now, Peter, right? The OECD spends on average, the average OECD country spends more than twice what we do on aged care. So we spend 1.2% of GDP, they spend 2.5% of GDP. Now, you'd think if you did that, you might end up with 20 inquiries over 20 years in a Royal Commission, wouldn't you?
Well, that's true. But the announcement today, it points out that staff, it wants to make it more appealing for staff to be able to look over those in aged care. Is that, I mean, that would be a good start, wouldn't it?
Well, you've got to pay people more if you want to do that.
That's
right. And what we do know is that people do all sorts of jobs if they get well paid in them. People go down coal mines, for example, and work in dirty, dusty, dreadful conditions, but they get paid well for it. And it's no good to just continue to say we want a casualised workforce, mainly of women, and often people who've just arrived in this country to work in aged care. Because the other thing about that, Peter, that you'll recognise is that we've shut our borders. So a lot of those people that were coming into the country and taking up these jobs are not going to be there. We also heard the Royal Commission say that we have to have better trained people. Now, if you're better trained, you would expect to be better paid. So I think one of the most important things that Greg Hunt has to do, and I believe that he will listen to this, is to roll out training programs across the country. And let's not forget that the former aged care minister, Ken Wyatt, gave an address to the National Press Club around the time that the Royal Commission was announced. And he said, we're going to need 600,000 extra workers in aged care over the next 30 years. That's 20,000 workers a year. So really, we should be training a couple of thousand people a month. And the good news about that is if the government does accept that reform, then that will actually do a lot to bring down unemployment. So in fact, spending money on aged care is actually going to do wonders for the unemployment figures in this country. And that's why National Seniors has been saying you need training programs, and particularly for mature age Australians who have been out of work. And many of those want to do meaningful work, and they want to be paid a decent wage for it. The wage in aged care at the moment, now your listeners will be shocked by this, is $21, around $21 an hour. Now, a teenager can get more than that working at McDonald's on the weekend. I mean, this is why we've got to look at the wages issue and say, I would imagine that it would have to be improved by at least 30, 40, 50%. All those wages will have to go up. I mean, no one's going to be going and doing this work unless you pay people. So I think that's also an issue that has to be addressed. But look, the good news is we've had a second leak, almost twice what the first leak was. Who knows what the real figure will be like tomorrow?
Yeah, so, okay, I'm taking from this that it's not enough money and it's just going to take a lot longer than perhaps people realise to be able to get the staff numbers up to where they should be.
Well, we don't know what the real figure is. And this is the problem. See, when governments do this thing about leaking by degrees, you leaked $10 billion last week, you leaked 17.7 this week, whatever. We've got to look at the whole package and make sure. But the message that we're hearing is that the government is hearing what was said. And that's because Scott Morrison said on the day that he announced that Royal Commission that he was going to restore faith in the aged care system. So the amount of money he has to allocate has to restore faith. And the government has even said with its own budget figures that it's $30 billion better off than it was 6 months ago. Can you believe that? This is because of iron ore and company profits and all of that. So it cannot be mean-spirited when it comes to this, because there are millions of Australians that are waiting to see aged care reform. It has to be delivered in this budget. It's been promised in this budget, and it will become an election issue if it's not done properly.